It is I once again. My microphone's low on battery, so I get that chop chop mentality, get that Wall Street psychology happening. So just a quick video today about the way that aesthetic can change you in ways that you might not expect. So especially when you are a young blood, like a teenager, you tend to have this imagination, not even an imagination, it's really feels like very real. And in a way it is that the way that other people perceive you matters a great deal. So we've kind of tangentially talked about this before, but there's this idea that there is an authentic self-expression which primarily manifests in childhood into this kind of inauthentic affectation that you develop as an adaptation in adolescence, and then you have to kind of rediscover your authentic self later in life, especially if it's not working very well. And it's interesting because as you go through that process, you realize there are a lot of things that will change the flavor or the atmosphere of the way you are in very subtle ways. Like, classic example of that is these guitars on the wall. You can see here. I'm a guitar teacher, so a lot of people will ask me about what kind of guitar should I have. And I see a lot of different guitars, people with lots of different guitars coming through. And it's interesting because there are like literal components to the guitar that matter. For example, the pickups, the type of bridge that the guitar has, the type of body the guitar has in the case of acoustic guitars. And the list goes on, but those are kind of the big ones. But then there's what the guitar looks like. And what I've found in my personal experience of writing music on a few different kinds of guitars, these guitars you see on the wall aren't the only ones that I have. It makes a big difference. Like, you can see that black pointy one there. I had a guy come in once and he was just looking for the pointies. That's what he called it. And he was a guy who looked a lot like me, and he was a metal guy. Well, that was funny. So that's a pointy, really, isn't it? And it's a guitar that you're probably not going to write like Eric Clapton-esque music on. You're not going to write like neo soul. Or like singer-songwriter folk music on that guitar, right? You're almost certainly going to write metal on it. And what started this train of thought for me was this cotton sweater, right? I love this cotton sweater. I'm very fond of it. I have another one which I might have worn on video before, which is kind of more of like a deep beige type of color. And I feel like Bill Withers in this. And I've started, like, I wrote this Bill Withers-esque song that's really fantastic, by the way. I'm looking forward to sharing it with you, but it's interesting. Even just like a cotton sweater is enough to like trigger a change in affectation and even affect, right? So the distinction I would make there, affectation is something a lot of us are very aware of. So the idea that you will kind of put on airs for people, but then affect is more of a concept that exists mostly in psychology. It's not really a ubiquitous term, but affect is kind of goes all the way to more unconscious things like your emotional state. And I think even that actually can be affected quite profoundly by the way that you present yourself. I remember as like a 14, 15-year-old thinking that I was going to become kind of on the emo side of things. This was back in the heyday. So I had my short-ish hair, and I grew it out into a sort of mop, right, that would cover over my eye like this. And but I was kind of a happy-go-lucky kid, you know what I mean? I was a lot more like I am now, which is to say, not actually laid back, but laid back in my dealings with the world, I guess. And trying to always kind of see the bright side and have a sense of humor about things. So this emo aesthetic is sort of antithetical to that. And it actually started to really affect the way that I actually perceived the world, and of course, naturally, the way that the world perceived me. And I think it was very jarring to a lot of the people in my immediate social circle who were basically like, dude, what are you doing? You know, what kind of game are you playing here? And of course, I had no idea what kind of game I was playing. In retrospect, it was a very pernicious game, but it's one that we nonetheless do feel compelled to play. And even if we don't feel like, you might say, oh well, I don't play that way. You know what I mean? It's very easy to get on your high horse and sort of imagine that you're not the kind of person who's duplicitous or puts on airs or whatever. But I guess my point with the cotton sweater is it's often very subtle. You know, the whole like emo fringe thing, that's this like exaggerated example, or like a pointy black guitar. But I think it's important to consider the ways in which we do this because it's expedient to us. In the sense of like whether it's through social media or if you're at a party and you have somehow imagined that the version of you that is going to be best received is X, Y, or Z version, right? You know, you put on some outfit or you have a certain kind of way about you that you wouldn't operate that way normally. And of course, a bit of that is normal and healthy, but the consequences actually can sometimes be more far-reaching than we initially anticipated. I really like that film, The Mask, with Jim Carrey for this. This is like a kind of extreme version of it, where you can see like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is another version of this, where your desire to be different than you appear to be day to day superficially can actually lead to the creation of almost like an alter ego, or sometimes an actual alter ego. In the case of like multiple personality disorder or whatever, but in the case of fiction, it tends to have a supernatural element. So in The Mask, it's this mask that he puts on that, as far as the movie's conjecture about it goes, as I recall, I think it's like the god of mischief, Loki, or like an artifact of his, or in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's like this potion that turns him into, I suppose, a more kind of base and animal nature version of himself. And so I think that's part of the appeal towards doing like going through this process of changing yourself through aesthetics or through the kind of transmogrification of your affectation, is that there are it does allow you to maybe discover parts of yourself that you might not have fostered otherwise. So in the same way that it can turn you into some kind of external mandate of yourself, it can also allow you to be more like the version of yourself you won't allow to come out from deep within. I feel like that's the more of the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde flavor of it. But I think the most important thing is that you be aware that it's happening. For me, in retrospect, I don't think it wasn't just the emo thing. Suffice it to say, that was just kind of a phase, but the process of doing that, of changing myself in ways that I perceived other people would validate me for, that continued, and to a degree continues to this day. In the case of this YouTube channel, it's interesting, like, at the moment I don't have to deal with it because no one gives a shit. But if I see this happen with YouTube channels a lot, if you were to get, if your first 20 videos get 10 views, and then you make your 21st video and it gets 10,000 views, you probably ask yourself at that point, what did I do differently, right? What was the thing? What was like the variable that made it 1,000 times more popular than all my other videos? And it's going to take a lot of integrity to not just chase after that. I'd say that's what like 90% of YouTube channels do, is like they find that niche by chance usually, but sometimes by insight. And then they just full bore go after that. Because otherwise they have to deal with the demoralization of being heard, being seen, but then not being able to sustain that, right? And the tragedy of doing it in a way where you're trying to connect to people in as like populist a way as you possibly can. Like if you're basically trying to be popular, if you're not exploring internal worlds that you might not be comfortable with, but instead you're just trying to get validation from the outside world. So you're importing external stuff, leather jackets, whatever, motorbikes, cigarette smoking, that kind of shit. The problem, the tragedy of that is that it leads you to behave really like a cartoon character. Again, this was something I ran into in primary school all the way back then. Because I have a high, what they call verbal intelligence, which is how I'm able to make videos like this, so that I can kind of articulate myself with relative ease. Well, a lot of kids who are in the same position will remember this as well. In primary school, if you read books and you were able to use words like articulate, another 7 or 8-year-old doesn't know what articulate means. So the consequence of that is that they go, what are you talking about? I don't understand what you're saying. And then you say, oh, articulate, like, put it in a certain way. And they'll go, well, why didn't you just say put it in a certain way? I'm sure at least at one point everyone's experienced this in some capacity. But the thing is that if you only say put it in this way, I'm going to put it in this way every single time, you're making this concession of simplifying there's an input coming into your head which says articulate, and you're outputting a different thing, which is a which is a reduction of what you were originally saying and what you're originally being. And so you become, you start trending towards this cartoon character version of yourself. And it's not necessarily specifically about dumbing down. It's more just like you're simplifying everything that you say and do and be as a consequence of a mistaken idea that that is what people actually want. But what you realize is, really by definition, if that's all you do, the best you can be is a good cartoon character and not a good man or woman or human, right? Let alone, a good artist or thinker. So you have to be aware that this is a social instinct that is constantly coming at you from every side, whether it's the cotton sweater you're wearing, or the guitar you're playing. I keep thinking it's over here. Or the guitar you're playing, or the YouTube channel you're working on, or the haircut you have, or the kinds of friends you have, or the kind of mannerisms that you use. If you're like me and you say, hey man, hey dude, what does that mean for you? Right? People are going to think that you're a hippie or whatever, right? Do you think that you're a hippie? Are you going to subconsciously start aligning yourself with the political ideologies of people who look and sound like you, right? That's probably a slippery slope, right? So that's all I think. I think I've said what I need to say. Just keep it real, as they say. And again, if you're not going to completely keep it real, because again, we can't really, just know what you're doing. Understand why you're reaching for the empowerment through whatever you're going for. Like cotton sweaters, they're pretty good. I'm not going to lie, they're pretty great, but they have definitely impacted me by osmosis. All right. All the best, guys. Until next time, let me know what you think about it.